Hello friends, and welcome back to the channel, where we delve into the mind of a villain. In this entry, we'll be taking a look at Colonel Nathan R. Jessup from the legal drama film, A Few Good Men. While he appears as a respected and highly decorated military commander, beneath the facade lies a self-deceived, hypocritical, and morally corrupt man. A man who by his actions has betrayed the code he has sworn himself to. While the film doesn't reveal much about Colonel Jessup's past, he is described as a key authority figure and a highly decorated colonel of the United States Marine Corps who fought in the Vietnam War. He was on the path to becoming the next director of operations for the National Security Council, thus moving from military to politics. The plot begins from Colonel Jessup's unwise decision with regards to PFC William Santiago, who was underperforming in his training due to bad health. Santiago wanted to be transferred somewhere close to home. Instead of granting this, Jessup decided that his platoon soldiers should use a code red to assault him, so as to coerce him to do better. The assault on Santiago, which involves gagging him and shaving his head, inadvertently leads to his tragic death. But rather than taking responsibility for his actions, Colonel Jessup attempts to cover up his mistake and frame his soldiers. The tension arises when Lieutenant Cafe becomes appointed to represent the two Marines who are being accused of Santiago's murder, but defend themselves by confessing they were just following orders. Apart from being responsible for the death of his soldier, Colonel Jessup has many undesirable traits, but the root of all of them is his prideful nature. It is Jessup's pride that manifests in other character flaws, and it is his pride that becomes his undoing at the end. This arrogance is displayed in his own words. In his conversation with Lieutenant Cafe and his team early in the film, he says, "I run my unit how I run my unit." Colonel Jessup's pride is also seen in his defiance. While he demands respect from his subordinates, he has little regard for his own superiors. He callously disregards the cautionary memo from the command of the Marine Corps about discontinuing Code Red practices, and later on he has to be reminded of the decorum to address the court as Judge or Your Honor. Jessup also humiliates his executive officer Markinson to keep him in line, mentioning his personal superiority in rising higher in the military ranks than him, although they were commissioned as officers together. When Markinson advises him against keeping Santiago on base, Jessup's ego causes him to tell Markinson to never question his orders in front of another officer. His sense of superiority is also seen by his disdain for Cafe and the Navy lawyers, whom he regards as inferior and incapable of defending the nation. We see this in his closing monologue at the end of the film, and when he refuses to give Cafe a copy of Santiago's transfer order and angrily demands that he will be asked nicely, although by all standards Cafe was courteous in his approach. In Jessup's eyes, the thought of having to answer to people like Cafe repulses him. Jessup's decision to deny Santiago's transfer was already a mistake to begin with, let alone the order to give him a code red. Jessup claims that he is merely doing his duty as an officer to train Santiago, citing a slippery slope situation that would occur if they were to just simply ship off all incompetent soldiers. But Santiago's problem was not mental or motivation related, but it was due to a physical ailment. Jessup must know this to some extent when he mentions that Santiago cannot run from one place to another without collapsing from heat exhaustion. And since Santiago's subpar performance was not due to his attitude, but due to his physical limitations, a code red would be redundant in fixing his state. So why then was the code red ordered? To answer that, it's revealed that Santiago had broken the chain of command by requesting for a change of transfer from the Naval Investigative Services. In addition, he was going to inform on one of his platoon mates for an illegal firing of his weapon. It is likely that Jessup's decision to deny Santiago's transfer was to get back at him and teach him a lesson for ratting out his fellow soldiers. But more than that, He was probably trying to silence Santiago, as he would divulge incriminating details of the illegal fence line firing if he was transferred off base. And finally, having a Marine with subpar performance under his leadership would not look good on him. It's not a far stretch to assume that Jessup's motivation was selfish, that he was only thinking about himself and his career record, while hiding behind his supposed duty as an officer to train Santiago. Again, this is further worsened by the fact that he was somewhat aware of Santiago's health issues, of his proneness to heat exhaustion, and the fact that Santiago had to resort to breaking the chain of command to request a transfer off base suggests a toxic leadership structure that gave him no choice. Ultimately, Jessup's pride becomes his undoing, as Cafe exploits his pride over having complete control over his Marines and traps him in his own words. Jessup digs a hole for himself when he lies that he gave the order to his men for Santiago to be unharmed, but then makes a contradicting statement that he was still in danger from his fellow soldiers. Rather than suggesting that his soldiers would disobey him, Jessup defiantly admits to giving the code red, choosing to incriminate himself, although the judge explicitly says he does not have to reply Cafe's question. Jessup treats his platoon in Guantanamo Bay as his metaphorical playground, a place where he can bend and break the rules, manipulating and forcing his will. This is a classic case of what psychologists describe as childhood play. His transference of childhood play into his manhood reflects what must have been a very strict rearing by an iron-handed, controlling father. His possible lack of play and socialization during childhood is reflected in an obsessive need to exert his will during older age. Further proof of his possible regressive childhood is the fact that Jessup's anger is uncontrollable whenever he is insulted. He is in denial of his regressive psychological problems, self-righteously hiding them behind words of duty, country, and honor. He is paranoid, perhaps an extension of any post-traumatic stress disorder syndrome he may be suffering from, likely after fighting in the Vietnam War. His paranoia makes him see enemies everywhere, and this, combined with his savior complex, is a mechanism that motivates his action beyond reason. While outwardly Colonel Jessup describes himself as a true warrior who defends the United States, inwardly he is also defending his psychological persona. His main motivations are to extend and enforce his metaphorical playground, which was denied in his childhood. By aspiring for a political career, he wants more power to extend the limits of this playground. A quote from the film offers much insight into Jessup's character and motivation. "Son, we live in a world that has walls, and those walls have to be guarded by men with guns. Who's going to do it? You? You don't want the truth, because deep down, you want me on that wall." Colonel Jessup suffers from the savior complex, seeing himself as a martyr for his country and the American way. While his past contributions to the country are undeniable, it is unclear whether his savior complex served as motivation for his climb in the hierarchy, or whether the climb in the hierarchy transformed him along the way. He tells Cafe that he should be grateful for sleeping and rising under the blanket of freedom he provides. And in his most iconic line, he tells him that he can't handle the truth that the country needs decision-makers like himself to survive. In his monologue speech to Cafe, Colonel Jessup defends himself, basically saying that he is the one to make the hard calls, and that sometimes ensuring the security of a nation requires those difficult choices. The Code Red is one of those choices. Jessup sees himself as a misunderstood hero, like an extension of his savior complex. He sees himself as someone who the common folk cannot understand or appreciate while they enjoy the freedom he acquires. Now, we're not here to debate on the usefulness or the morality of the practice of a Code Red. It's safe to assume that Jessup did not mean for Santiago to die, and while it is possible to empathize with Jessup's point of view, it is an undisputable fact that he acted selfishly, committing perjury and attempting to cover up his mistake by fabricating evidence. The worst of his selfish and cowardly behavior was that he was willing to allow 2 young Marines to go to prison for life, rather than taking responsibility for what he did. At the end, even after getting convicted of his crime and being taken away, Jessup appears to show no indication that what he did was wrong. In contrast, the 2 Marine soldiers who carried out his Code Red orders realized their error, that they were supposed to fight for the people who couldn't fight for themselves. Even Jessup's second-in-command, Lieutenant Colonel Markinson, commits suicide out of guilt. Jessup displays no such regret or remorse. He has forgotten that as a leader he has a duty of care for those people under his authority. Vengeful, arrogant, and manipulative, Colonel Nathan Jessup is an example of a person suffering from the Savior syndrome to compensate for his paranoid tendencies. He sees enemies everywhere and wants to crush them with an iron fist. It's possible he may have suffered deeply as a child by the hand of a very authoritarian father, and this reflects in his adulthood a desire to make his army platoon his playground. Jessup bends the rules and declares the ends justify the means in his defense of the country. This is a serious contradiction, as he bends all rules and creates dangerous precedents under the guise of his code of honor. So what do you think of Colonel Jessup, folks? Was he right and wrong at the same time? Let me know in the comments below. And thanks for watching, folks. If you like this video, subscribe to see more like these, and you can check out some of the other characters we've covered here.